It began with Palestinian organizations wanting to pressure Israel. Now the so-called BDS campaign is gaining momentum. Israeli officials have called it a strategic threat. Could this campaign help the Palestinian cause? Should Israel be worried? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. It's a campaign of boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel, known as BDS, designed to pressure the Israeli government politically and economically into recognising the rights of all Palestinians and to comply with international law. Now, 10 years after the first call for a boycott, BDS campaigners are celebrating something of a victory. The US State Department says that while it remains strongly opposed to a general boycott of Israeli goods, it's not opposed to sanctions aimed at Israeli companies operating in the occupied territories. Before we bring in our guests, today Paul Brennan sets things up for us from the Jordan Valley.
The fertile soils of the northern Jordan Valley have been cultivated since ancient times. Today, though, it's on an industrial scale. Plantations of palms and vines producing dates and grapes, figs and pomegranate and herbs. But it's all on occupied land which has been illegally farmed by Israel since 1967. And even here, some 500 meters below sea level, clouds are gathering. Avigdor Abel came to the Jordan Valley more than 40 years ago and has seen many summers and many winters here. If he's concerned about boycotts and sanctions, for the moment he doesn't show it.
We have no problems in the US. In Europe, there's hypocrisy. When they have enough dates, they declare a boycott. When they don't, they buy.
A majority of European Union countries want products from the illegal settlements to be clearly labelled as such. An EU policy vote is expected soon. And the US State Department's new position on the issue is seen as valuable economic leverage for the Palestinian BDS movement, which wants a policy of boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel.
Israel is predicted to lose about $47 billion in the coming 10 years because of BDS. We know, thanks to an UN report that came out a few days ago, that Israel has already suffered a 46% loss in foreign direct investment in 2014 as compared to 2013, partially because of Israel's assault on Gaza and BDS.
But although money matters, it's not the only factor here. The plantations down here in the Jordan Valley are filled with, quite literally, money trees. Each bunch of these dates is worth around $40. The whole tree might yield a crop worth around $1,000. And the farmers who look after these crops are very different to the ideological settlers that you find elsewhere in the West Bank. These farmers were put here by the Israeli government, and they say that they will leave if the Israeli government tells them to do so. But the reality is, they're never expecting the Israeli government ever to tell them to leave here. The reason why is that this land facing the Jordanian border has strategic and security significance as well as economic importance. And so, confident that Israel will not evacuate this land anytime soon, the mayor of the Regional Settlers Council tells me he will simply find ways around the BDS movement.
We opened the markets not to be depending just in Europe. In Russia, in China, they don't ask if it's from the West Bank or it's not from the West Bank.
The dates are still green, still ripening. They won't be ready for harvest until September. But once picked, where will they be sold? For the first time in years, no one's quite sure of the answer to that. Paul Brennan, Al Jazeera, the Jordan Valley.
Well, there's now a growing counter-boycott campaign, led of course by the Israeli government, which has characterised the BDS movement as, quote, a strategic threat. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the campaign is reminiscent of Nazi Germany's campaign against Jews, adding that the attacks on the Jews were always preceded by the slander of the Jews. What was done to the Jewish people then is being done to the Jewish state now. US presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has also joined a chorus of American politicians who've spoken out against BDS. In a letter to the Israeli-American billionaire and political donor Haim Saban, Clinton raised alarm at the campaign, saying, "We need to make countering BDS a priority. I'm seeking your advice on how we can work together to reverse this trend with information and advocacy and to fight back against further attempts to isolate and delegitimize Israel." Let's bring in our guest for today's programme. In Ramallah, we're joined by Hussam Zumlot, a Deputy Commissioner for the Fatah movement. And from Jerusalem, we're joined by Dan Diker, who, among many other things, has just authored a book called Unmasking BDS, Radical Roots, Extremist Ends. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Dan, if we can start with you. For much of the last 10 years, the Israeli government has been pretty dismissive of the BDS movement. Now, though, lately they've changed their tone, calling it, as we heard, a strategic threat on a par with Hezbollah and Iran. It's obviously got them rattled, hasn't it? Why?
Well, it has got them rattled, Adrian, because it actually is economic terrorism against Jews and Arabs both. In fact, behind me are the hills of Judea and Samaria, where thousands of Palestinians work together with their Israeli colleagues, and several thousand Palestinians have already lost their jobs because of this economic terrorism that is called BDS. So for those who support BDS, what they're doing is actually indirectly supporting Iran. Because if you weaken Israel, and today Israel is the strongest country in the region fighting Iran, together with its Arab neighbors who also want to fight Iran, by trying to weaken Israel, by destroying it and isolating it through economic terrorism, you are really weakening the entire Arab world, and you are causing the loss of thousands of jobs of Palestinians.
All right, well, let's bring in Hussam Zumlot. Let's see what he makes of that. The BDS movement is economic terrorism.
What your Israeli guest has just said confirms that the BDS is a very effective instrument. It confirms it because what he said confirms that the mentality, the mindset in Israel is a mentality of the master and the slave, that they let us work, but they deprive us of our legitimate political rights. It's exactly what the South African apartheid regime used to tell the black Africans, that you should be thankful and grateful for us to give you work while we are controlling you and stealing your resources. No, sir. What we seek here is freedom, is justice. What we seek here is dignity. What we seek here is independence and building our own state, building our own factories, giving our own people their own employment. Stop stealing of our resources and land and water. Stop besieging our territories and colonizing our land. And therefore, this mixing of the situation is what we face here. The BDS is a civil and political coalition of Palestinians, very wide, that has issued an international call of action to the citizens of the world to act. Not to act against individuals, not to act against Jews, not to act against any collective entities, but to act against all institutions that are implicated in the illegalities. And the international community and the citizens of the world have been responding positively and have been heeding the call of the Palestinian coalition.
Hussein, I just want to clear something up here. What about when we heard of what Hillary Clinton was saying in that letter to Haim Saban, where she said there's a need to fight back against further attempts to isolate and delegitimize Israel? Does the BDS movement seek to delegitimize Israel?
It is not the BDS movement that is isolating Israel. The BDS is not an objective in itself. The BDS is only an instrument among so many other instruments we, the Palestinians, are using, including the ICC, the internationalization, the UN, the recognition of the state of Palestine, the popular resistance on the ground. It's only one method. For Miss Hillary Clinton, she needs to know that we are applying peaceful method to resist this occupation. After 67 years of exile and refugee, after more than 47 years of occupation, 21 years of a failed peace process that saw the agony of the Palestinian people, tripling the settlements and the colonies, besiegement of Gaza, 3 wars on Gaza, 1 major intifada, a wall, and all what we live on a daily basis of socio-economic deterioration. After all that, what are we supposed to do? I'm now really addressing this to Ms. Hillary Clinton. What are we supposed to do exactly? Is this a call for us to surrender, for instance? No, we will not surrender. surrender our very legitimate rights. We are here to stay. We are here to resist. The question is only not should we resist or not. I assure you we will resist.
Okay.
We will resist the theft of our land. We will resist the killing of our babies and families. The question is about the method. Only the method and the means of resistance. And we are adopting peaceful, legitimate, legal, international, diplomatic modes of resistance. And for that, we have the support of the vast majority of the world.
All right, well, let's hear how Dan has to answer that. Dan, Israel only has itself to blame, ultimately, hasn't it?
Well, you know, Adrian, I think if you were to take the mask, rip the mask off of what Mr. Zomlot is saying, the Arab world and the international community is simply not buying the lies that are coming out of the BDS movement, and Mr. Zomlot and the other people of the Palestinian Authority who are stealing and killing the economic future of our own Palestinian colleagues, as well as trying to destroy Israel by what they call resistance. The word resistance, everybody knows, means terrorism in other forms. Allow me to tell you, here is the book called Unmasking BDS. Mr. Tamlal's, his accomplice, Mr. Asad Abu Khalil, who he knows very well, is a leader of the BDS movement. He writes, the real aim of BDS is to bring down the state of Israel. And that is exactly what what my Palestinian colleague will not say to you on Al Jazeera, because it masks the real intentions of the BDS movement, which is to use the International Criminal Court, as Mr. Zomlot just said, as to go to the International Court of Justice. On the one hand, Mr. Zomlot and his ilk are pleading with Israel to destroy the Hamas. On the other hand, when we do fight this classic Islamic warfare that has occurred on the Palestinian side and is very much among extremists since the 7th century and the Muslim prophet Muhammad, in order to destroy the enemies within Islam. It's the exact same political warfare that is being used, the political terrorism that is being used not only against Israel, but against Palestinians. Right. And that is why there is absolutely no place for BDS. And you know something, Adrian? Many Palestinian colleagues have worked with me on this book. And if you go to the 3,000 workers that lost their jobs at SodaStream, they will curse Mr. Zomlot. They will curse the Palestinian Authority for being the economic murderers of their own people. And that's why we have to say we have to fight BDS. We have to come to terms with our Palestinian neighbors and have a compromise for peace. In order to be for peace, you must oppose BDS. And that's why Mr. Zomlot, the way he speaks now, is an enemy of peace. He is not an advocate of peace.
Hossam, are you an enemy of peace?
Of course not. I belong to a national movement and to Fatah and to the PLO that has really given Israel what Israel has claimed that it wanted for all these years. We have given Israel full recognition of it as a state on 78% of our land. We have given Israel the opportunity to negotiate for 21 years. We have done it in good faith. We have done every trick in the book, from establishing our own institutions to cooperating and dialoguing with successive Israeli governments, to even cooperating in the security sense, to providing and lifting the responsibility of Israel, providing social services to the Palestinian population. And it is an Israeli occupation responsibility under international law. Yet your guest here claims that we are against peace. The only side that is against peace is the side that colonizes, is the side that occupies, is the side that besieges an entire population in the Gaza Strip, is the side that de-Arabizes Jerusalem every day, is the side that just started your show by calling West Bank Judea and Samaria, is the side that calls for a Jewish state, as if the rights of the minorities and the Muslims and Christians are not to be respected. The objectives of the BDS movement, so are the objectives of the PLO and the Palestinian people at large, are one, the liberation and the end of this occupation. Number two, the return of refugees to their homes and to their livelihoods. Number three is the end of apartheid and segregation and discrimination against Palestinians inside Israel and everywhere else. This has nothing to do with Israel. This has to do with Israel's expansion. Right. It has to do with Israel's colonialism. It has to do with Israel's hegemony. It has to do with Israel's theft of our land. It has to do with this mastermind that I exist only as a worker, as an employee, as somebody to be exploited, to work while I am working on my own stolen land and harvesting with my own stolen water. This logic is rejected, and yes, to the Israeli guest, we will resist this. But my good news to you, we will resist it peacefully. We will resist it non-violently. We will use every legal, legitimate tool to make sure that the majority of the Israeli society who elected occupation, who elected colonization, who elected Netanyahu will know that their choice comes with a price.
Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Adrian. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Zumlot because he just affirmed exactly the point of this book of unmasking BDS. Because he very eloquently stated, and I congratulate him for that, the 3 points of the BDS, the 3 principles of BDS, the end of what he calls apartheid, meaning he calls Israel fundamentally an illegitimate state. And this, number one. Number two, the return of refugees to Israel that are today in Syrian refugee camps languishing, in Lebanese refugee camps, and throughout Judea and Samaria, as well as Gaza, which today is Hamastan. And, of course, the Hamas would kill Mr. Zumlot and his Fatah friends, which is why they can't go into the Gaza Strip. But what he affirmed, Adrian, let me just finish this point, please.
Do not speak on behalf of Hamas or others.
Dan,
do not speak on behalf of others and put words in the mouth of others. Please,
I'm going to, Mr. Zumlot, in the same way that Mr. Zumlot, Mr. Zumlot is calling Israel. Adrian, here's the point for your Al Jazeera viewers. Mr. Zumlot has basically, in his last statement, called Israel fundamentally an illegitimate state. And illegitimate states, the Nazis also participated in this type of propaganda, and Mr. Zumlot and his PLO cohorts are doing the exact thing. When you call someone an illegitimate state, any kind of resistance is legitimate. And that is why BDS is an economic terrorist tool in order to isolate and cause the unraveling of the state of Israel, which means it has nothing to do with coming to a two-state for two-people solution.
I just want to know,
that is
Dan,
the trick
I just
of
want to
BDS.
know, Dan, I just want to know how a non-violent movement like BDS could bring down or destroy a strong state like Israel.
Well, it's a very good question, Adrian. And if you look, for example, at the attempts of Mr. Jibril Rajoub in order to have Israel expelled from the International Soccer Association, and if you look at the misstatements of the head of the international cell phone giant Orange, who misspoke and said that he would cut off a relationship with Israel, and then he apologized and came to Israel to make that apology public. These types of propaganda can actually have negative effects on states and on trade relations. As a matter of fact, my friends in the Palestinian labor unions say that they receive help from our labor union here, our Histadrut, which is working together with the Palestinian labor unions in order to hold up Palestinian workers' rights. If you try to destroy Israel through economic means, you are still using political violence, even though it is not the blood of terrorism, but it is absolutely the violence of economic terror and economic terrorism in order to try to weaken and isolate Israel, which will end up weakening the emerging Palestinian sovereign entity, as well as all of Israel's other partners in the Middle East. And this is exactly why BDS must be defeated. It must be vomited out. And Mr. Zumlot should join me in pushing for a cooperative peace between the two peoples instead of speaking in terms of propaganda against apartheid, in favor of apartheid and all this other nonsense. Mr. Zumlot, the time has come, my dear friend, to stop assaulting Israel and start working with us for the cause of peace for the Palestinian people and the Jewish people.
Let Hussam speak. Hussam, please.
Israel is assaulting itself. No one is talking about Israel. Everybody is talking about Israel's policies, Israel's expansion, Israel's colonialism, Israel's control of people. No one is targeting Israel. Stop this. And all this talk about economic terrorism and before it political terrorism and before it diplomatic terrorism, you are just in search of catchy words to describe our non-violent actions. I don't understand. What do you expect from us? You keep saying, Mr. Zumlot, come and talk to me. I have spent half of my life talking to you and with you. I have spent all of my career trying to make sense of a peace process that was used by your successive governments as a smokescreen, as a tool to manage, to deepen, to strengthen the occupation and colonization. We started the peace process with less than 200,000 Israeli settlers inside the occupied territories that you call Judea and Samaria. And today we have more than 650,000. How do you explain to a people that have been making peace for 21 years that today 1/3 of them in Gaza are besieged? The people in the West Bank are unable to move anywhere. Those in Jerusalem are subjected to daily, slow but sure campaign of de-Arabization and confiscating their IDs and destroying their homes. How do you explain to the refugees being killed in Syria and Lebanon have nowhere to go that their rights are not even acknowledged? After 21 years, I belong to the national movement tell you that the time to rely on bilateralism is over. We will rely on the legitimacy of our cause, on the legality of our cause, on the steadfastness of our people, and of the support of the millions of the freedom-loving people all over the world. The one thing that you don't know is that there is a sweeping change in the public opinion in Europe, even in the United States of America, and you are not waking up to that. If you really want to save Israel, stop calling the West Bank Judea and Samaria. If you want to save Israel, stop this mindset of hegemony. You see me as a worker. You see me as a servant. See me as a human being, as equal to you. It doesn't matter, 2 states, 1 state, whatever, but see me as equal. And I tell you, until you pay for the price of your identity and your ideology, you will continue seeing me as a servant. And I will continue resisting, and I'll continue choosing my method of resistance. And today I tell you, the most effective method of resistance is the peaceful method of resistance.
Dan, the UN says that foreign direct investment in Israel was down by almost 50% last year in 2014. As Hussam was saying there about the view in Europe, the campaign is having quite a deep impact upon Israel now, isn't it?
Well, no, really it isn't, Adrian. I must take issue with that statement. In fact, Israel's high-tech sector, the computer chips that you use in Doha and that Mr. Zumlatt uses in Ramallah, the agricultural water-saving technology that the United States and Europe and the Arab world are using all come from Israel. And Mr. Zumlatt should pay attention to Arab political opinion, because I'm in touch every day with my Arab colleagues in states in the region, and they've become sick and tired with the type of economic warfare and terrorism that you're supporting, sir. And so I think that if the Palestinians and the Palestinian people, whom I talk to every day, and I've got all kinds of data, there's no time to talk about it on this program on Al Jazeera, but we've got data from hundreds of Palestinians who are sick and tired of the propaganda that you, sir, and Mr. Abbas and others in the Palestinian Authority are using in order to try to cause Israel's unraveling and weakening. And we have to move towards a path of reconciliation and peace and destroy this BDS monster before it begins to weaken everyone in the nation, in the region. On the other hand, Adrian, your question, sir, Israel is a very strong economic country, and that strength allows it to help other countries in Africa, through the Middle East. And without mentioning names, not to embarrass any other countries in the Arab world, many people listening to this program know exactly what I'm talking about. So if you want to have a strong Middle East, a Middle East that can fight against the Islamic Republic of Iran and the terrorism that comes through the Hezbollah and the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad and the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade in the West Bank, you have to work with Israel and support Israel, because Israel supports peace, Israel supports the Palestinian people, and we shall work together and destroy this BDS monster. We're rapidly running out of time.
Hussam, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, and yes, we do work with many principled Israelis and Jews worldwide. By the way, the BDS movement has in its membership hundreds and thousands of principled Jews who see that Israel's policies must be punished and Israel must feel the cost of its occupation and its illegalities. So all this accusation is far from it. And we Palestinians, the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian people, the PLO, have been for all these years ready to negotiate. And I'll tell you, we are. And we will go back. But not to the last 21 years. We have redefined negotiations. We will only negotiate not with Netanyahu, but in a multilateral, in an international forum. We will only negotiate in a framework that is agreed upon based on international law, not your definition of what is disputed and Judea and Samaria and history. And we will negotiate on a timeline, only 1 year and end of occupation for 3 years. And we will not negotiate under the current situation of expanding settlements and stealing our land while we are talking about peace and two-state solution. And yes, we will offer the Israeli people a way out of the mess. And yes, the last elections in Israel have confirmed our fears. Netanyahu is not the cause, but the manifestation of the majority of the Israeli society who have grown comfortable, who have grown indifferent with the status quo, and they want to continue it. And our strategy now is really to hit some of these people who elect people like Netanyahu in the pockets and tell them this is your wake-up call.
Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to end it there and move our discussion online. We're out of time. Gentlemen, many thanks indeed. Hussam Zumlat in Ramallah and Dan Diker in Jerusalem. As always, thank you for watching. We welcome your thoughts. You can get involved in the debate and get in touch with the programme through our page at aljazeera.com. You can post your comments on our discussion at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or you can tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finnegan, and the rest of the team here in Doha. We'll see you again. Bye for now.